want to get to that moment in your life where you had that accident. You had the parachuting accident. I believe it was with 3 other SEALs who were parachuting, right? And it was your second attempt, so your second jump. That's what it was. And then you
Yeah,
ended up
on that day. Yeah, we did 2 jumps. So on the second one, was
second jump.
mhm.
And then you ended up falling 80 feet,
Yeah, I mean, I stalled
something
my
like that.
canopy at 80 feet, so I came down pretty quick after that. I was trying to avoid airplane on the ground, and if I maybe been more experienced jumper, I would have, in hindsight, made arrangements earlier in my approach. And but anyways, I got myself in a really bad spot of trying to avoid the airplane, and I was also around a lot of jumpers, but I was going perpendicular to their path, and so I really didn't want to hit anybody in the air because it could collapse both our canopies and we fall. And I didn't want to kill anybody, other than me that day. And so I tried to turn really easy, even though I knew I was lower than I meant to be. It took me longer to get past the airplane. So I was lower than I wanted. And so I knew I was lower than you're supposed to be when you turn, but I thought I could still do it. The canopy was bigger than the one that I normally use. So they'd come out of stalls slower. And so I turned and like immediately I like hit the ground. It was like I went from like 80 feet to like zero so quick that I didn't have really time to be like scared or anything. I just like threw my legs out and tuck and rolled and kind of ate it. I was like, adrenaline was buzzing at that point. I was all like kind of tangled up in my parachute, and, like dirt in my mouth and stuff, and my helmet went flying off. And I was like, holy crap, that was like a really hard hit. I was like, God, man, I probably like broke a leg or something because I was just like everything was just vibrating. It felt my adrenaline was pumping. I was actually jumping for fun because I had to do this like Arabic school that I kind of got shafted that I had to do and nobody wanted to do it. My platoon felt bad for me, so they gave me extra time before deployment. So I was gonna go meet them. They were already gone, and I was supposed to meet them on Monday, but I was jumping Saturday with a couple of my friends that I probably wouldn't see for a while. I was like, oh man, they're gonna be so pissed at me if I broke my leg, and so I'm like untangling the parachute. And then when I looked at my legs, they were laying different than how I thought they were in my mind. And that was like my first indication. And then I was wearing swim trunks. And so I just touched my knee and then I tried to move my foot and I couldn't. And I was like, oh. So I knew what had happened. And then I just like, laid my head down on the field, looked up at the blue San Diego sky and said, all right, God, let's do this now. That started the next chapter in my life.
Oh my gosh. Like that is, I mean, how how hard and how long did it take to process? Like, because it seems like it was really quick in terms of like, okay, like let's go into this new chapter. But then you have all these like surgeries, I'm assuming, like you have all this stuff that's going on, and everything's completely out of your control and your career's over and you have to go through a whole new direction. So how mentally, what was going on? Take us there.
Well, I was pretty stoic, early on, maybe like the first 10 days. Had emergency surgery the next morning. I was in probably the most pain that I had ever been in. But after the surgery, my back felt pretty good because I was in so much pain that even the post-surgery pain was like minor compared. But for 10 days, I was like in the ICU or whatever. And before they moved me to the VA like rehab hospital, it was just like a surreal moment. It was like, it was almost like I being like a witness at your own funeral though. It was very strange. Like for one, when as soon as I like realized I was paralyzed and like laid down on the ground, it was like the whole like visual, my whole like imagination of what my life was going to be like in the next 20 years of my career and who like what I was going to be and what I was going to do with my life just disappeared. It was like that person died. And then it was like an empty path that I had no idea what was going to be on. And so it was like watching myself die and in the ICU. And I'm fortunate enough to have a lot of people that really care about me. And so I had a lot of people just coming by the hospital, like, being over my bed and be like, oh man, Dave, are you all right? And being like really upset. And, it was just really weird. It was like weird. It was like watching people come by my casket or something. And I'm really thankful for them. It was really encouraging too, but like it was also like, this is so weird. So I was like doing all right, because I wasn't really thinking too far ahead. Kind of two things really sent me down into like a spiral up. I don't remember how many days after, but I was still in the ICU. I started having very intense pain in my legs. It was unbearable. And there was no amount of medication that they could like shoot me up with that seemed to do anything to it. I was losing my mind, like, and it was just not never ending. It just went on and on and on all night. And that started being like a regular occurrence, like every night and sometimes during the daytime. I couldn't believe how bad it was. And you'd look at your legs and there's nothing wrong with them, but it feels like someone's like snapping your bones. And
Oh,
it's like, so amputees get what's called phantom limb pain or phantom pains. And paralyzed people sometimes with an injury that's similar to mine can get, they call them like neuropathic pain, but it's basically just like your nervous system freaking out. And it feels like, all these bad things are happening to your legs. It's not. So that was one thing that made it very difficult to stay positive. But then also I went to the rehab hospital and, they teach you how to get in and out of a wheelchair and like all that stuff and make sure you're fine with that. And then when you went home, like I was just dying to get out of the hospital, like go home. And when I went home, that was like when it really, really hits you, you're like, oh my God, this is my life now. It took a long time after that. Then it just started going downhill. I really struggled with the nerve pain. I really struggled with losing my job, my purpose, what I felt like my purpose in life was. It was just took me to a dark place that I didn't think that I would ever be at. Fortunately, I was able, my parents, encouraged me to like, force myself out of it. Finally, it was like you had to hit rock bottom, but I was just constantly thinking about dying or like killing myself. And I was like too scared to kill myself, thank God. But I would think about it just all the time. It's just one night I having nerve pain. I'm like at the end of my rope. And I had broken up with my girlfriend at the time. I just cut myself off from everybody. That girl I eventually married, her name's Janet.
mm.
I called her that night and I said, one night when I was just like at my bottom, I was like, I don't know what to do. Like, I can't take this. I was like, I just like my faith, I like pray for help and I just don't feel like anybody's there and I don't know what to do. And she was like, after we hung up, she called me again. She's like, come outside. She was like on the street and I went out there and she was like, even if you don't think God loves you and cares about you, he does. Don't feel like it right now. And so that was kind of like a turning point. And she, at the time, had memorized the book of James, like just wanted to challenge herself. And so the first chapter of James in the Bible talks about like, trials and hardships. And so it was like a perfect thing to have on her mind and ready to go for what I needed. And so that was like that night I feel like was kind of like hitting the rock bottom and then heading in the right direction. And so that was kind of the beginning of getting better, I guess. And that was around a year post injury. I would say that was when that night happened. I remember an older guy at the VA was like, takes about 2 years to like come to terms with this. And I was like, 2 years? I was like, you wuss. Like, I'm gonna be good with this in like a month. And but it took about 2 years. He was right.